Okay, thanks for kicking us off, Kyle. My name is Jeff Chamberlain. I run an investment firm in the suburbs of Chicago focused on electrification, not only of vehicles, but battery power for the grid to enable renewable power. We're going to have a panel here to talk about investments, talk about technology, and talk about U.S.-China. If I could invite everyone who's on the panel to come up and join me so that I'm not up here all alone, that would be great. And while they're joining us on stage, I want to start, I think, where Kyle finished up here, and thanking Pin Nee, who I feel I have a long, friendly, and valuable friendship and relationship with Pin, going back a good 15 years. I learned last year at the CGCC Gala and in our subsequent trips to China that what I just said about my relationship to Pin applies to about 1,000 people. Certainly everyone in the room, and I say that as a compliment. It's amazing to me the depth of relationships that Pin has with so many people. So I imagine every single person in the room feels like I do about Pin and what I just said. Thank you, Pin. So thank you for that long-time relationship, and thank you for organizing this as well. I always enjoy coming here. So before I introduce the folks on the panel, I'll start with an introduction myself and then start at the end of the next 45 minutes or an hour. As I mentioned, we run a venture capital firm that was spun out of Argonne National Laboratory. And for those that might not know, it was one of the founding energy labs in the United States back in World War II when we were doing all kinds of nuclear research. There are 17 Department of Energy labs in the United States. Argonne is the lead lab for all battery research. They work with Berkeley National Lab and Sandia and Oak Ridge, but Argonne is the lead. So I tell you, I feel I got very lucky working 10 years for the U.S. federal government, leading the research and all of the intellectual property licensing for battery technology, much of which is in almost every technology in the world. Battery technology we licensed that was invented at Argonne. One of the biggest lessons I learned there is prior to working for the U.S. government, I was an industrialist. I worked in the semiconductor industry, I worked in the mining industry, going from invention of products to full-scale, high-quality products for customers like TSMC in Taiwan and Intel. And I believe that deeply informs the conversation you're going to hear from the panel today, that there is a lot of similarities in the decades of development of microchips that really dominate our lives today in terms of impact and gross domestic product. That same thing is happening now with the transition off of carbon into electrification. So there are a lot of similarities there. The three things that I hope you hear and take home from this next hour, this is what I meant by I'm starting at the end. One is, while I was at Argonne, I did a lot of work in Japan, Korea, China, and Europe for the Obama administration. And we collaborated with the Chinese starting in 2008 through 2016, when we were fairly equal in developing the supply chain way back in 2008, 2009. I spent 10 years not going to China until earlier this year, and I could not believe my eyes that when I thought we were equals and collaborating back in 2008, 2009, and we were going to compete to develop the supply chain for electric vehicles and renewable power, that competition, I will tell you, I'm going to be a little bit dramatic here, okay? That competition is over. And I don't just mean the quality and the low cost and the luxuriousness of the electric vehicles. I mean all of the components that supply those electric vehicles. The battery is certainly the heartbeat of those electric vehicles, but there's all kinds of components that are inside the battery and around the battery that enable electrification. I assure you, as a lifelong industrialist and technologist, the Chinese have done some amazing things. They make very high quality products. They do it with a lot of automation and thinking about the customer needs. So one of my 3 points I want you to take home is China has established itself now very squarely in the lead. And as scary as that might sound to the Western world, it means opportunity. We should be happy that the Chinese have done this, because now the whole world gets to leverage that supply chain. And that's what we're here to talk about. So that's point one. Point two that I hope you hear from the panel here today is electric vehicles are more than about just the battery. There's an obsession by the investment community that I belong to on electric vehicles and the batteries, but there are so many components and adjacent technologies that you're going to hear about today that are really important to lowering the cost and improving the performance, and by what I mean by that is increasing the adoption rate. So that's point two. It's more than just the batteries. And point three, Illinois is here to help. There are many states in the nation. We happen to be here in Illinois and Chicago. You're going to hear about the state of Illinois and the Chicago region wanting to help onshore manufacturing into the United States from China. So those are the three big points. Okay, now by way of introduction, I don't think I have this written down in order, so if you could raise your hand. We have Carl Trainer from Kaporis. We have Bruce Welty from Resonant Link. We have Sam Trench from 6K Energy, Jeff Granato from Iontra, and Chen Bai from Integrity Capital Partners, and the person you just met, Kyle Schultz from World Business Chicago. So what I'd like to do next is each person is going to spend about 5 minutes introducing themselves and what it is their company does, and then I'm going to come back to Q&A. I'll kick it off by asking some questions, but then open it up to the audience for further questions. So we'll start with Jeff. I was thinking we finished it with World Business Chicago, if you don't mind. We'll start with Jeff. Okay, great.
Thanks, Jeff, for that introduction. Jeff Granato from Iontra, co-founder and CEO. By way of background, I was co-founder and CEO of Proterra, which was an electric bus company, energy storage and charging systems. And we made trips to China back in the early stages of EV development back in 2010, 2011, and saw amazing things back then. I mean, what the Chinese bus manufacturers were doing back then was nothing short of extraordinary. We were really inspired by those visits. And moving on to Iontra, we really focus on improving battery performance. And so the whole world is looking for better battery performance, and we're taking a different approach. So instead of looking at developing new battery materials or chemistries, we unlock the performance potential of existing batteries that are in scale production already. And we do that by focusing on battery charging and management. And so our next generation sensing and charging algorithms deliver some breakthrough performance benefits, such as improving cycle life by 2 to 4 times, charging up to 4 times faster than conventional charging. We can charge down to minus 20 degrees Celsius, and we do all of this while maintaining safer operation of the battery by eliminating failure mechanisms like plating and dendrite growth on the anode. And this isn't just theoretical. We have over 8 million hours of testing that's been proving the performance. In addition to that, we have several independent third-party validation studies. We also have millions of tests that have been performed by product OEMs and battery cell manufacturers. And we also have received our first safety certification from Underwriters Laboratories for an aggressive power tool application. On the commercialization front, our algorithms are available for product integration today, and we're working on our first custom MCU. It's really the industry's first purpose-built combination charge control and fuel gauge MCU that'll deliver a low-cost solution in the smallest package to consumer electronics product manufacturers. And it really is a breakthrough for many companies who are attempting to improve performance and do it in a very easy to integrate way. And we have over 12 active customers that represent some of the biggest names in the battery supply chain and electronics industry. And that represents over half a billion units annually, potential for Iontra. And we also are expanding into the automotive industry by working with battery cell manufacturers, component suppliers, and some of the EV OEMs themselves. And we're very excited about the potential to work with Chinese manufacturers. We have been collaborating with some Chinese product OEMs and battery cell manufacturers for over 4 years now. And just coincidentally, when Jeff invited me to come here, it was really a coincidence in terms of our efforts to start to develop more Chinese company collaborations. We have a team that's going to be visiting China next week, and we have over 10 meetings set up with battery cell manufacturers, product OEMs ranging from smartphone to e-bikes and power banks and other product. And so, anyway, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. And you can begin to hear what I was saying already. That's not a battery company you just heard about. Right? If the battery is the heart of the electric vehicle, what Jeff just described in this little microchip is part of the brain to keep that electric vehicle running. Okay, Sam?
Thanks, Jeff. Also, I want to thank the CGCC for their continued efforts in fostering these partnerships between Chinese companies and U.S. companies. And frankly, also a little bit of a coincidence when Jeff invited me, again, 6K, which I'll talk about in a second, is a portfolio company of Volta. When he invited me to this gala to speak about what our technology is doing in the battery space, I asked if somebody named Pin Ni was involved, and he said, of course. And so I had the opportunity in 2014, working for Wangsheng America as part of A123 Systems in the battery business starting in 2009, and again was acquired by Wangsheng to go and live in Hangzhou and actually merge the Wangsheng battery business with the A123 battery business. So I spent a lot of time on the phone with Pin that year while I was in Hangzhou. And it's great to come full circle back to Chicago. Actually, another coincidence, both of my children were born in what was formerly known as Evanston Northwestern Hospital in the early 2000s. So it's great to be here and tell you a little bit about what 6K does. So we use a technology that is essentially what you have in your kitchen, a microwave. However, it's about 100 times bigger than that microwave in your kitchen, but that component is an available off-the-shelf product that you can buy in the United States. We take that microwave and we run it through a waveguide generator, and we put it at the top of a large reactor that we developed out of MIT. So the company was founded out of the MIT Plasma Science and Fusion Center. It's over a decade old, so this technology has taken a long time to get to where we are today. But what we do is we take that microwave, and at the top of a reactor, which is about 4 feet in diameter and roughly 15 feet tall, we create a 4 to 5 inch ball of sun, which is 6,000 degrees Kelvin in temperature, hence the name 6K. So you can't do much with a 6,000 degree ball of sun, but we've engineered a way to take that ball and with gas flows in that large reactor create a homogeneous production zone that has no moving parts, it has no fire, no combustion, it's just plasma, the fourth state of matter. And in that plasma, we've engineered and developed a way to inject a solid, a liquid, a slurry. It frankly doesn't matter what the state of the material is. As long as we can get it into that plasma, we can control the temperature very precisely, and we can make chemistry happen really fast. And so, for example, one of the main chemistries today for batteries, so as Jeff mentioned, the battery is really critical. We're actually the heart of the battery cell. So what we make is cathode active material. So in that plasma, we're able to take the constituents that go into that NMC battery, so nickel, cobalt, and manganese, and we're a midstream processor of those materials. We take those materials and we put them in the plasma. And what typically takes 3 days to process and generates a massive amount of waste, uses a lot of energy, and frankly uses a lot of water. No matter if it's done today, it's done in Korea, it's done in Japan, and it's done predominantly in China. But no matter where you do it, they all use that same process. It takes about 3 days. What we do is we eliminate steps. We're able to make the chemistry happen in the plasma in about 3 hours. We can do it for about half the energy, 10% of the water, and we generate 0 solid or liquid waste. And so for every 1 kilogram of powder that's made of that chemistry, there's 30 kilograms of sodium sulfate waste that has to be dealt with. Either dump it in water, or you boil it down and turn it into a cake and landfill it. Either one of those is bad and expensive. And so by eliminating those steps, this technology can do what's done today in China or Korea or Japan. We can do it domestically for cheaper. And so to me, that's what the definition of sustainable is. You've got to be sustainably sustainable, good for the environment and low cost. And so that's one big element of 6K's technology. But my job is running the battery materials business, so 6K Energy. We'll go to market using a different process if we need to support our customers. And frankly, in that year in China, one of the things I really learned was you do whatever you have to do to support your customers. And to bring other chemistries to market faster, we'll use the conventional process. However, what the plasma allows us to do is offer a cost reduction in the future. And so we can launch, get to market, if needed with conventional technologies, and offer a cost reduction and an ESG benefit for our customers in the future. And today we're working with all the major OEMs, most of the cell manufacturers around the world. We just signed a major deal with a large alkaline battery manufacturer, so we have the ability to make multiple chemistries. And I look forward to answering more questions and talking about what 6K can do to help bring the battery ecosystem to the United States and to the state of Illinois.
Thanks, Sam. And I'll say in a slightly different way something Sam just said. The most expensive thing in an electric vehicle is the battery. The most expensive thing in the battery are the materials that Sam just said his company makes, the cathode active materials. So what he just said about a shortened process, lower cost, lower energy use, lower water, these are the kind of improvements that remind me of the semiconductor industry that I came from. A constant march down in cost is what's required for the electric vehicle industry. And again, it's not just the batteries, it's not just the cars, it's all of the supply chain upstream of that. Thanks, Sam. Carl?
Thank you. And first, thank you all for being here today. It's exciting to talk about Illinois as being the center of technology. In fact, Caporis, the company that I represent today, was originally born in Columbia, Missouri, at the University of Missouri, was brought here by those resources that Jeff described at Argonne National Lab, and participated, is now a proud graduate of the Chain Reaction Innovations program at Argonne National Lab. And we're just so grateful for the support that we've had, not only from the technical ecosystem here, but also from Volta and the state of Illinois that has supported us with matching funds with some of the federal grant programs that we have, and also through Illinois Invent, a matching program on the venture capital that's being invested in Caporis and in our Series A coming up. Maybe a little bit about Caporis. With all due respect to my battery brethren, really appreciate the body and now the anatomical metaphor that you made. Jeff, if you think of batteries as the heart, perhaps capacitors are the liver. Very often overlooked, I think. Maybe not the sexiest technology. In fact, as the world pursues electrification, and particularly in China, while there are all kinds of developments in power module material technology with silicon carbide and gallium nitride, the one lagging component, the one device that is not seeing a lot of material innovation is the capacitor. And for those of you who are or not familiar with capacitor technology, capacitors are key to power conversion. When we're converting from stored energy to energy that can be used by AC drives and servo motors. Well, it turns out, just a little history lesson, that in the capacitor world, there has been a challenge with high operating temperatures, high operating voltages, and by voltages, 800 to 1200 volts if we're thinking about a band. High operating temperatures, maybe 150 degrees C. Those are very typical for those silicon carbide or gallium nitride power semiconductor modules. Capacitors have not been able to operate at those temperatures, be it sintered solid ceramics or wound polymer film. Those are the two principal technologies deployed in capacitors. So Caporis offers a bit of the best of both. And we're very proud we have issued patents not only here in the United States, but also in Japan, and also very proudly in China through the CPO. For our coated film technology that's used in capacitors, so the idea of creating a self-assembling 3D substrate on the polymer film that relieves the polymer film of electrical stress and allows the system to operate at a much higher operating voltage and higher operating temperature. We're also really proud that the Caporis technology, nanoscale lamellar porosity, is being deployed not only in polymer film applications, but also on-chip capacitors and in engineered substrates and semiconductor applications as well. I must say in a previous life, I've had the opportunity to visit China often, not yet in a Caporis capacity, but We're fortunate that Kapoor's technology, because it is in a roll-to-roll format, is ready for use by capacitor manufacturers in Japan and in China. And as we understand, 30% of the world's global market for capacitor production is done in China. We're in Japan next month to meet with some of the major players globally in the capacitor industry. We're looking forward to forming relationships with people in this room and beyond to help leverage our activity in China as well. Thanks, Jeff.
Great, thank you, Carl. And I do like the extension of my analogy to the capacitors that Kapoor's is developing are the liver of the body of the electric vehicle. And just to drive home a point Carl is making, power conversion is really important. If you're moving power energy from a battery to something else, wheels, a screen you're looking at, your refrigerator, you have to convert that power. And I just want to drive home something Carl said. It's really important in terms of the kind of obscure nature of the supply chain in some cases in terms of bringing costs down. The capacitors used today are very temperature sensitive, and what that means is if you use them on board a vehicle, you have to have all kinds of cooling associated with those capacitors in order to keep those capacitors alive. So if you can have a different type of capacitor that does not require that cooling, that means lower cost, lower mass, and lower volume. So it's kind of these are kind of secrets in the supply chain that you're hearing about here today. Okay, Bruce.
Hi, my name is Bruce Welty, and I'm a board member at Resonant Link, and we make wireless chargers. So we have the medical business where we make a small wireless charger which you can put adjacent to, say, a pacemaker, and it'll recharge the battery in the pacemaker. And we also have a large battery charger for forklifts in warehouses. We've since split the company into two pieces for obvious reasons. The product that works in the warehouses intrigued me when I first saw it because of a previous life where I was actually an entrepreneur in automated warehouses. I think I've been in more warehouses than any of you, I'm sure, probably than any human being ever should be. And I did that for a long time, 20, 30 years. And during that time, I learned a lot about the problems in a warehouse. First, I sold technology, and then one day I decided to become a warehouse person, a warehouse owner, and lease buildings, and became my own customer. In the course of doing that, I found a robot that I thought was interesting, and it saved us money and time and effort and was a better solution. So I bought some of those robots, about 200 of them, and ran a pretty big operation using these robots. And then one day we hosted a tour for Amazon, which was a friendly competitor of ours. And in the course of that meeting, they decided that they thought it was a better way to run warehouses too. So they bought the company that made the robots, and then informed me that I couldn't use the robots anymore. Harvard Business School thought that was such a great story, they wrote a case study about it. So I've learned over the years that if Harvard writes a case study about you, it's a little bit like having a disease named after you. So I get to relive this experience about 5 times a year when I go sit in for these classes. But what I learned from that process was that innovations occur, and they can be very meaningful. And I went from being a seller of technology to a buyer of technology, and I started to develop what I would call is just a simple structure to say, is this going to be a successful product or not? And so when I saw Resonant Link, my first impression was, this fits the category of a product that really has every opportunity to be successful. It's better, it's faster, or at least as fast, and it's cheaper. And that's my simple equation. Is it a better product? Is it a faster product? Is it a cheaper product? And if you've met warehouse people or farmers, you'll see that they really don't spend a whole lot of time being impressed by your technology. They don't really care if it has a buzzword in it, or if it's a cool thing, or if it's got a lot of value in the stock market. They care about whether or not it's better, faster, and cheaper for them. So in this context, we have a product that really simply, if you're running an autonomous vehicle of any kind, it be an autonomous robot, which, the sequel to this story, after Amazon told us we couldn't use this robot anymore, we built our own robot, and we spun that out as a separate company called Locus Robotics, and that company's been very successful and currently runs many, many warehouses around the world. And through that process, we built something that we thought was better, faster, and cheaper. But we did have a problem with charging because we couldn't figure out how to get the charger and the robot aligned given the pixelation of our warehouse. Think about it. A 1 million square foot warehouse, you can't have a grid that's too small. You can't have tiny pixels because it's just too much data for the computer. So our grid was 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters, and you can't really align a robot to plug into a wall in that kind of a grid. It's just not enough focus. So we actually had to make a smaller grid around the charging. Well, that was really difficult, and if I had known wireless charging was an option, I would never have even had to think about that. So we have all seen wireless charging solutions for electric vehicles. Some of them are, or I say people-free charging. Some of them are arms that will put a plug into the outlet in your car. That's not very good. There's a lot of other issues too with now, if you have a fleet of cars and trucks that don't have drivers, how are you going to charge all those? So it became pretty clear that wireless is the only way to go. So that's a good business model when you're the only solution that works. So what we've done now is we've proven this out, and we use a resonant coil. I used to be technical enough to describe all these details, but I'm going to defer on the details as exactly how it works. But the point is that it is better in that it requires no human interaction. It's reliable, it's safe, and it's as fast or fast enough. It's hard to believe air will ever carry charge as fast as copper, so I don't think we're going to win the speed race. And it is less expensive because you just don't have to have people hanging around to charge these things. So we're very excited about the potential of what we have here and interested to partner with Chinese. I think there's quite a lot of opportunity to take advantage of the supply chain you've built, the technology we built, and the huge market here for EVs.
Thank you, Bruce. Something Bruce just said is really important. Most of us, maybe all of us, already use wireless charging. I don't know about anybody else here, but when I go to bed at night, I just set my phone on my little wireless charger. I think today we view wireless charging as a convenience, but it is not going to be a convenience, as Bruce was just kind of pointing out, in the future, whether it is automated warehouse with robotics or forklifts or fleet vehicles or even consumer vehicles. If you want to charge a car in 15 minutes or 10 or 5 minutes, that's actually a dangerous operation. It's a heavy cable, a lot of voltage and amperage. You want to go through a safe wireless charging. I think that's one of the things Bruce is pointing out here. Okay, those are some companies. Now we have Mr. Chen Bai, who is an investor like I am at Volta at Integrity Capital Partners in China. Mr. Bai.
大家好，我们是我先用中文说，我们是来自国内的明德投资。Good afternoon, everyone. Don't worry, I will use English. Good afternoon, everyone. We are Integrity Capital Partners. We've been rooted in China since 2017. So we are a private investment firm. And until today, I think we have over 40 portfolios. Roughly, I think in terms of portfolio value, roughly $1 billion. And if we look at all those portfolios, I think they drop into 3 categories: battery, EV, and hydrogen. And there are several. We have some unicorn deals. Probably some of you may heard about. I want to mention some of this, like UB Tech, UB 选. the first humanoid robot maker that listed in Hong Kong market. And we have Minotech, Mingluo Keji, that is one of the largest supplier to Tesla. They do the automation AI robot to facilitate the production line. And we have one of the top 5 electrolyte maker also here in the room. And also we have some unicorns, so almost unicorn in hydrogen industry, fuel cell stack. So I think briefly summarize our investment philosophy. I think there are several things we strong believe in. I think first one is we think renewables is natural resources plus manufacturing. For example, like in the times of fossil fuels, like places like Middle East, where the natural resources is so abundant that is a gift for local people. And also in the times of renewables, I think natural resources is not enough. We always need the manufacturing capacity. We always need the hardware, right? For solar, for example, solar, to convert those natural resources into the energy we can use. So we believe manufacturing is the essential thing we have to have. I know many US investors or European investors, they tend to avoid asset-heavy business model or manufacturing, but I don't think that will work. Eventually, we need hardware or manufacturing to make climate transition. And the second thing we believe in is how we understand manufacturing. I think manufacturing for us is how can we make the technology into the product with enough capacity to drive the cost down. So you see many keywords, right? Technology, products, capacity, and cost. Before this panel, I mentioned Jeff because one of my European friends told me that US company always innovate, and Chinese company always iterate, and European company always regulate. But that means, no offensive, but I was told by a European friend. But I think there are Chinese company, typically for our firm, we invest typically in Series A or Series B. For the companies in this stage, I think the key task is to solve the mass production. I think for not only for our portfolio, I think for many Chinese companies, they are super good at scaling up technologies. I think this is why we strong believe that doing manufacturing or our portfolios are doing very, very well, very strong in China, in the domestic market. And one more thing I want to mention is among all these 40 portfolios, we have, that's for our domestic business, but we do have some overseas deals. And by the way, Sarah, our founder, is also here in the room. And me and Sarah, we ever work with some European investment firm, so that we have 3 deals in Europe market. And one is the first deal we made with this ICP, that is a German carbon fabric maker. And now we merged that company, and we transferred the technology from Europe to China. And now the company is doing the mass production in China, and they supply the Airbus, Boeing, and Chinese aircraft maker. So if you look at this deal, technology in Europe, manufacturing in China, and also markets also partly in China, partly in Europe. And the second deal I want to mention is the one we made last year, that is a British hydrogen EPC company. And for this company, because we also have some China angle, the reason why we invest in this one is we have some electrolyzer maker or hydrogen equipment maker in China, and now we can supply the hydrogen EPC company in Europe. So in this deal, markets in Europe, technology and manufacturing in China. And now we are doing the third deal, potentially the third deal in overseas, that is a German recycling company. And if you look at this deal, markets in Europe and technology and markets in Europe, manufacturing in Europe, technology from China, because all those recycling company, the equipment actually from China. So again, we began to see there might be a trend that before Chinese companies manufacturing car, they do everything and they export the goods from China to overseas. But now, among our portfolios, I think they become the technology provider for some cases, and also there are many technique know-how, manufacturing know-how in the process. So they began to export those manufacturing know-how to overseas and began local production. We call it closer to home buyers, right? If we have some buyers in the United States or in Europe, it's always good, closer to our home buyers. So and also this is why we come here and super looking forward to have more discussion with local technology companies and how to see how our portfolios can help and doing business together. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And I hope what you heard there is something we're excited about at Volta, is that all the way on the other side of the world, we found an investor in Integrity Capital Partners that thinks a lot like Volta. We look at investments not just as a way to put in $1 and take 10 out later. It's the idea of developing the supply chain. There aren't a lot of investors out there thinking that way. And if I could take 1 second, Xander Arkin from Volta, if you could stand up and wave, and Sarah Lee from ICP. If you're in the room and you're a Chinese company that wants to build manufacturing in the US, you have 2 investors you should talk to, because it's not just the capital that we have, it's all of our friends in our network that have a lot of capital that see the same opportunity that we see in launching manufacturing, moving manufacturing, onshoring from China. Okay. Kyle?
I'm back. Thank you, panel. Yeah, I appreciate the panelists giving me some time. So, by second introduction, Kyle Schultz, Chief Growth Officer at World Business Chicago. And really what World Business Chicago does is we are meant to be the concierge for any company looking to make an investment in the Chicagoland market. I've been working on how to pair in your anatomy into this. Maybe we're the skin, we're the piece that kind of brings everything together. The welcoming remarks, we describe ourselves as a public-private partnership, which one is how we're structured. The public and private sector invest into World Business Chicago so that we can go out and help companies. But really what that means, if you're a Chinese company or any company, is that we sit at the intersection between the public sector and the private sector. And our job is to be able to work with both sides so that they feel comfortable in getting a company and a business to market. So we often work very closely with a company to understand what type of real estate you'll need, what type of tax incentive, property tax breaks, and other public tools that we can do to help make the project cost effective. We work with the regulatory environment to understand how do we get you to market as quick as possible with as few unnecessary hurdles along the way, and communicate that to each side and really create a hand-holding process. We are the hand in the glove as we go through that. What's unique for World Business Chicago is not only do we represent the city of Chicago and the nearly 3 million consumers that are here, but we now also represent the greater Chicagoland market. Chicagoland as a region is nearly 10 million residents strong. We have been the top metro for 11 years in a row for corporate expansions and relocations. We have the most diversified economy of any US market. No one sector of our economy makes up more than 15%. So from Chicago, you're going to be able to find a rich customer base here, and our overall GDP would make us the 22nd largest economy in the world. And what's really nice about working with World Business Chicago is not only do you have myself and my team, but also a network of regional partners who know how to do this. If Kevin Considine and Mohammed Eli could stand up, please, and be recognized. Mohammed left. Oh, there he is in the back. So for anyone here, these are partners that we work with on a daily basis who are thoughtful, who know how to help companies come in and invest. Ultimately, we understand that there is some concern about what happens at a local level. That there are companies that are coming here to Chicago that are interested in opening up that US facility or expanding a sales office into something more permanent. Our job is to make sure that at any point in that journey, whether it's a workforce conversation, whether it's working with local elected officials, whether it's working with the federal government, that we bring all of those resources and that connection from the public sector directly to you so that you can focus on your core business and generate the revenue that will ultimately create the taxes that grow our local economy. The part I'll end with is once you're here, our relationship does not stop. There are at least 3 companies in this room here that have come from China, have made significant investment that we continue to support on a regular basis, whether that is their relationship with the federal government and making sure the US government understands the impact that they have on our local tax base and the jobs they're creating, working with the Customs Border and Protection Agency to help expedite inbound shipments from China so that they can get processed quicker, or working on any number of workforce challenges that these companies tell us. So our job is not just to welcome you and then let you be. Our job is to continue to be that resource a year in, 2 years, 5 years, and down the road, that you always have someone you can call that can help you navigate the complexities that is the U.S. government. As the Director General of SIPA shared yesterday, the U.S. and China have different cultures. And that cultural difference has really been exacerbated by the pandemic. But what is more evident every time we have a chance to talk with a Chinese company is we have shared values. And I'll quote my favorite poet and business philosopher, Pin Ni, one time, is it doesn't matter if it's red or blue, ultimately what is the most unifying color for all of us is green. And as long as there is a capitalistic cash opportunity for us, there's a way to make this happen. So happy to talk with anyone about how they are approaching the U.S. market and what Chicagoland, and the Midwest can be part of that growth strategy.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I had not heard that poem. And I do agree with it heartily, that what I'm talking about, the opportunity here, just to be clear, you heard about a lot of innovation on the stage here today, and there are no big Chinese manufacturers on the stage. And we heard Mr. Chen Bai over there say, in America we innovate, and in China you iterate. I think that's a little too simplistic. There's a lot of innovation in China as well. However, the core idea that you're hearing me talk about here today is that we can create wealth and do good at the same time by taking what has been built in China and helping them spread that around the world. And that's good for people that need jobs, it's good for governments, it's good for people that want to buy really good products, and it's good for investors. So I agree with what you just said, Pin said, about green being a unifying color.
He's a great business philosopher.
Indeed. Okay, so we have about 15 or 20 minutes for questions. I'm going to kick it off with a few questions, and if there are questions in the audience, we can do that as well. What you haven't heard yet from the audience, or from the panel and the audience, is one thing we seek out as investors is companies that have potentially a diverse number of applications, what we call platform technologies. That it's more risky as an investor if you invest in something that has one customer or one application. So I'm curious if someone on the panel wouldn't mind talking about how your technology is a platform technology. And if there are no volunteers, I have a short list on who I'm going to call on first. So any volunteers?
So for Iantra, we actually started out as a platform technology and got very focused on batteries. And there's really 3 different areas that we think about application for the technology. Number 1 is within battery charging and state of health and related types of use cases, and that really spans from milliwatts all the way up to kilowatts. And so we can serve everything from hearables and wearables all the way up to EV and storage applications with the technology that we've developed. The second thing is that we've developed a number of tools that are helpful for companies to evaluate battery performance earlier in the process, so further upstream, either during the materials development process to get a quick assessment of how those materials will perform in a battery cell design, as well as in the production process, either with quality scanning for input materials going into manufacturing, or at the end of the line looking at quality and yields from the production process, and then finally in the formation stage of the battery cells prior to shipment. And then the third area that we have the ability to expand into is completely different applications using the technology's advanced sensing capabilities, and also the ability to control current the way that we do is really useful in the coatings industry, especially for corrosion suppression, because we're able to eliminate the porosity and roughness in those applications and extend the life of materials that are intended to withstand the environment for many decades. And then also for materials bonding, joining applications for mixed materials or similar materials, and then also for improved current flow for PCB deposition and other types of applications.
So definitely things outside of batteries and electric vehicles. And Carl, can I pick on you to talk a little bit about the other products that you're thinking about as well?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about Caporis in the capacitor applications, and that generally involves either some sort of wound or prismatic form factor. At Kaporis, we're also very fortunate. We have a member of our board who was the CEO of Peregrine Semiconductor, took that company public, and then sold that company to a Japanese company, Murata. Jim Cable helped us to identify application of Kaporis technology in engineered substrates for semiconductor applications. So I don't know how many folks are familiar with RF. We have it in our phones, whether we know about it or not. It turns out that there are applications for what we call silicon on insulator, SOI, that are critical in the use of semiconductor and creating some devices that support the RF industry and aerospace and other communications tools. We're very fortunate that Kaporis technology helps to enable that at a lower cost and provide more thermal stability than has been known in the SOI community to this point. Now, I think there's some people in France who might argue with the regulation comment. It turns out Soitec is one of the leaders in that silicon on insulator area. We're in active discussions with several semiconductor manufacturers about how to deploy our technology at scale with those manufacturers now. So I hope that's a little bit of an indication of the variety of uses of Kaporis technology.
Indeed, and in fact, I know the panelists really well. Every one of them has a story about how their technology is a platform technology, but I'm going to move to a question on working with China. And Sam, I'll start with you because I know you lived in China working for a Chinese company. What, off the top of your head, what do you think of in terms of why it's important or how you would work with a Chinese partner? What is in your head?
Yes, so I mean, clearly at 6K Energy, as we're at a point of our maturity level from TRL already ready for production, MRL from a manufacturing readiness, we are now at the scaling stage. And so clearly with the scale that has basically transpired in China for battery materials over the last 10 years, we can learn a lot from that expertise. So that's really important to 6K, a partner that has that expertise. And frankly, as well as a partner that has capital. We're a company that's in Series E fundraising at the point of scaling. So we have customers that have validated our material. We have adjacent markets that have validated the manufacturing capability of the technology. And so now we're at a scaling stage. So one of the things that is important for us are companies that are interested in getting a foothold in North America, helping scale a technology that they have experience with, and then have an opportunity to leverage that technology in the future to drive cost further globally. So, those are the type of partners specifically in China that we feel we can bring a lot of value to and also get a lot of value from, which is how I like any partnership. Really, truly, it's got to be value for both sides. And again, spending a lot of time with Pin, I have a lot of those, stories that really get to the point of a partnership that we're looking for is someone that really wants to bring value and get value out of it. And so really that's what we're looking for.
Great, kind of touching on what I was saying earlier, a lot of innovation in the Western world, a lot of scale in the Eastern world. It seems like a simple idea to me to put those two together. Any other thoughts from anyone else on the panel about working with China before I move to another question? Carl?
Well, as I mentioned briefly, while a significant portion of the capacitor industry is based in Japan, it turns out that most of those Japanese companies are doing their scale manufacturing of capacitors in China. So exactly to your point, Jeff, even the near neighbors in Japan are recognizing how far ahead China is in the electrification progression, and we're eager to follow those manufacturers into China as well. So we're looking, as Sam said, at those opportunities for partnership, both at the materials level and also in the manufacturing level of our products as well. Thank you.
A question for Bruce. I'll start with Bruce. What's the improvement? I think you touched on this in your intro, but everyone could say something about what's the improvement over the incumbent? Why would someone switch to your tech?
Well, in the case of wireless, it seems to me like there really is no alternative. And I always look at businesses and say, is this a need or a want? I mean, can you get along without this thing? And it seems to me like as we move through the electrification of the planet, that wireless charging is just going to be the only way we can reliably transfer that much power into that many devices. And we just have to find ways to make it better and better. Because it's interesting, some of the things that I've learned, you learn things in funny ways. I was golfing with a guy, and he told me that he was an electrical contractor, and he built big high-rises with garages in the basement. And he said all of his developers wanted him to put 30 or 40 electrical vehicle charging devices in the basement. And he laughed and he said, I don't know why they asked me for that, because only 4 of them will work at any given time. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, there's not enough power in the world to support this. So I started studying that a little bit, and I realized that we have a sort of a tide problem. We just don't have enough tide to float all the boats. We need to address power at its very, very basic levels, like where is it going to come from and how are we going to transmit it? We spend an awful lot of time and energy doing that with fuels, fossil fuels, gasoline, things that actually have physical characteristics. But now we have to build this huge infrastructure. And the end point of that is wireless, because it's the universal connector. So I think that is the opportunity here, is to try to figure out where we can find leverage points, build technologies that are widely applicable, and then leave it to the market and companies whose job it is to deliver the final power solution. Leave them the idea of how they're going to address the needs of that market. For instance, everybody wants to have power become part of their monitoring capability. They want to be able to say, if they're sitting in a warehouse, I know the charge level of every device in this warehouse. Well, we can't do that today. But that's pretty important, because everything else they have is online. And that's true now. Some of our cars, I have a Tesla, I've had it since it first came out. I have like a number 1200 in the production. And I've been driving it for 13 years. I've almost 250,000 miles on it. And that car to me is just a device that I can monitor. But then I go into warehouses and I see these foul, dirty, lead-acid battery charging stations with cables all over the floor that look like a health hazard, maybe even a toxic waste dump. And I think, how are we going to get that online? This is the opportunity that I see. But it's not trivial, because everybody that's ever worked in supply chain knows there's no such thing as a supply chain. It's supply chains. Every single industry has its own, and that's true of every charging problem. It has its own set of challenges and opportunities that we have to overcome to make this technology widely used across the globe.
Thanks for that. Mr. Bai, I've said some things here about how important it is to find the hidden, valuable investment opportunities in the supply chain, but I'm curious what you think about it generally. Why are you so interested in the supply chain?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, let me frame it in this way. I think for venture capital or for investment firm, for this term in the last decade, it basically means internet or asset-led or software play, where people always chase for the killer app, right? I think the key success factor is winner takes all, right? Like Meta or OpenAI, or if we can have one company that will solve all the problems in this sector. But I think in the world of manufacturing or in the world of battery, I think the scenes is not necessarily looking like that. I think the best case we can expect is winner takes majority. Even like CATL, right? They don't have the 100% share of the market, and Tesla as well. So in that case, because it's too complicated to build up the production, and it takes time. It takes much more time to build it. So that will give your competitor or other technology companies a room to catch up. So in this case, I think, back to our questions, I think for our company, ICP, when we were founded in 2017, to be honest, we missed the opportunity of investing in battery cell. But it doesn't mean we cannot enjoy the growth potential along the value chain. As I said, we have an electrolyte maker, we have energy storage, we have anode, we have coating machine, all these are connected to the battery cell. So I think also I think among our portfolios that we see there's a synergy among our portfolios. That means maybe we invest in firm A and they will be the supplier of firm B. And potentially if we invest in firm C, we can leverage A and B to test if the C's product is good enough. So we see a lot of benefits from supply chain angle and to lower the portfolio risk and increase the overall return. So that's why we are super into the supply chain or ecosystem angle. I think I strongly encourage the investors here should try this approach, right? To invest as a whole from the supply chain as a whole, not chasing for the superstar. Or I think that is big players or industrial GN's play.
Yeah, that's another example, I think, that reminds me of the semiconductor industry. It is not winner takes all. There's many winners. Last question from me, and then we have a few more minutes for questions from the audience. For Kyle, in spending many months now, and years really, decades, working with the Chinese, particularly the Chinese companies, particularly these last 6 to 9 months for me, what I have heard is the desire for speed, that in Asia generally, but in China in particular, things move very, very quickly. So can you articulate how it is that you can help with that problem, speed, in the US?
Yeah, I think as every business would know, speed to market is the most important thing that you have, right? If your product, if you're not able to produce your product, then you don't have a market and your competition can pass you by. Our job at World Business Chicago and the broader partnership that we represent is to make sure that we get you to market as quickly as possible, helping the elected officials, the department heads that oversee the permit and regulatory process understand why it's important, what your timeline is, and how that is key for our economic success, giving them a sense of what the buy-in is. As an example, on the southeast side of Chicago, we are in the process of building a microelectronics park. This will be one of the state-of-the-art facilities that will allow us to compete for the chips and microelectronics industry, recognizing that for this moment in time, we have about a 15-month window in which we need to capitalize on all of the monies that have been made available from the Biden administration. Policymakers, elected officials at the local, county, state, and federal level all understood that moment, understood what the economic opportunity was, worked with the anchor company to kick this project off, and assured them that we could have that timeline. At every step of the way, World Business Chicago was there to stress why it was important, why that timeline was critical for the company, and what it could mean for us and as our economy. So we work really closely to make sure that we understand why your timeline is what it is and help you work with the right partners to deliver that timeline and communicate a real set of expectations from both sides.
Excellent, thank you. We have a couple minutes here. Are there any questions from the audience for the panelists?
Thank you, the panelists, for the wonderful discussion. Quick question from Ming Fan from Heartland China Association, a partner, Ms. Ni Ping. And the conversation you had is really talking about the benefit working together with the Chinese partners, but there's a strong voice about not working with China. What do you see as the potential benefit coming in with the new administration or downside? Just curious about that.
Was the question, what are the benefits of not working with China?
There are definitely strong voices putting that at the risk, and hearing the strong intention to work with China. How do you navigate that? What do you see as benefits potentially and downsides?
Anyone want to take a shot at that?
So one of the reasons that we're headed to China next week is for the last several months we've been looking for fast-moving customers to help launch our technology into the market. And certainly, as Jeff was mentioning, I mean, really the motivation for us is to get to volumes and to find customers that are motivated to move quickly. And we have a number of ways that the Chinese customers are benefiting, either through improved costs we also improve their time to market because our ability to get to charge protocols is a fraction of the time as it normally takes. And so I see those as some of the benefits for both of us. In terms of the downsides, I mean, there are some concerns about IP leakage. And, you know, with our chip, we do have protections that are built in, tamper-proof and so forth, that should help to alleviate some of those concerns. But, you know, it still is one of these topics that we need to all get on the same page about because, I mean, we have 186 patents, and we have been accepted around the world, but there's still concern whether or not they're going to be honored. So just to be, you know, fully transparent. And so, you know, we just have to make sure that however we're collaborating, we pick the right partners, and we also work with companies that are going to look at the long-term relationship.
I think I'd add to that. Thank you, Jeff. I think I'd add to that to be more clear on what I was saying earlier. If you're Volkswagen or Ford or BMW or General Motors, I personally feel at this moment it's going to be very difficult to catch up and develop electric vehicles to compete with electric vehicles coming out of China. For those, I hope you've all driven them. They're fantastic cars. In my view, the best way is to partner with the same supply chain that the Chinese automakers are using. And the reason I start there is I don't know that there's a choice if these big companies want to survive. And I'll add to that with the following statement. Any partnership could end in divorce, right? Whether it's a business partnership or a marriage or a brotherhood, it could end in divorce. So I think one of the things that I see happening after my long industrial career is if companies from China want to manufacture in the Western world, a marriage or a partnership happens, but it happens under the rules of the local government. So I think one of the things that protects both parties is whether you're operating in China in a Chinese-owned JV or whether you're operating in the U.S. in a U.S. majority-owned JV, there are rules to read and know and what to follow so that in the case there's a divorce, you understand the rules up front. I think there's some protection there, is a sideways answer to your question. Any other questions from the audience? I can't see the lights. Just one more question.
He needs a mic.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So I've got a question for the stage. So as you mentioned earlier that in the past competition of electric vehicle building or like a battery building, that we are kind of behind from China. And now we see a lot of car manufacturers new rising from China. They were not car manufacturers before, they were not even battery maker before, and they're now making batteries level. Great performance, great low temperature performance, and also, you know, during the laps of racing, and they can still keep a pretty high level of, you know, the energy performance. And that brings down to the question, and now we see that, like you mentioned, BMW or like Ford or Mercedes-Benz, their market share in China had dropped, gotten back a lot dramatically. And that to my question, what do you see the major obstacles for us, like building a better battery? Is it like a policy making? Is it like the cost of labor, or is it like technology-wise? And if we could actually bring in more, like importing Chinese electric vehicles into the United States, or actually we build the batteries here, do you think we can actually increase the competition and eventually help us build a better electric vehicles? Thank you.
Boy, that's a good, meaty question. Yes.
Could you maybe just summarize exactly the question that I can?
Yeah. So my question is, do you think that if we can, from probably the policymaker, if we can import more electric vehicles, or like actually build the batteries here and have the laboratories here, that increase the chance of, you know, for the United States build a better batteries and a better electric vehicle and lower the cost?
So I think it's really important to build the battery, assemble the battery as close to the end product production as possible. Unless you're shipping a chassis from China to the United States and inserting the battery. You would likely want to do that battery insertion in the country of where the operation is going to occur. And so, being able to develop the infrastructure in North America to be able to process the materials competitively. Clearly, labor is an important element of the cost structure, but frankly, our technology eliminates steps and processes, so we take that cost out of the equation. One of the big factors that the United States is going to have to deal with is that waste treatment, waste mitigation of building and converting these materials from their pure metal form or their processed metal form into their usable form for the battery. Fortunately for 6K, we don't rely solely on electric vehicles. Clearly, that's a huge market for us, and we have plenty of players in that space, but battery energy storage as well. You want to assemble those batteries where those end products are going to go into the market, so we want that supply chain for the battery assembly to be done in North America. And then, as I mentioned also, even outside of traditional lithium-ion, we have customers in the alkaline space that are primary lithium-ion, so you only charge them once, but we make a powder that can cost-effectively go into all those solutions, helping bring whatever that end-use ecosystem, into domestic production.
And thank you, Sam. I'll add to that. I believe history repeats itself. So I'm old enough to remember when the first Japanese vehicles were coming to the U.S., and they weren't very good, okay, in the 1970s or 1980s. But the number one manufacturer of cars, to Sam's point, the number one manufacturer of cars by unit volume in the United States today is Toyota. And then the Korean vehicles started coming in the 1990s. The number 3 manufacturer by unit volume in the United States is Hyundai. I personally think history is going to repeat itself. There will be localized manufacturing throughout the supply chain, including cars, to answer one part of your question. Another part, I think you were asking how to improve the batteries. And in my view, there's 2 things. One, you're hearing about it in this panel. I think a lot of investors that are not deeply knowledgeable are looking for the next battery chemistry, not recognizing that lithium-ion batteries were invented in the 1970s by Exxon and commercialized by Sony in 1992. So we've gone through 50 years of cost down for lithium-ion. So an idea that a small startup was started as a small startup in California could make a solid-state battery and all of a sudden replace all of lithium-ion, it's just not realistic. What is realistic is the hard engineering of improving the processes and improving all of the elements of the supply chain to reduce costs and improve performance. That's what's going to continue to improve the batteries in terms of bringing costs down. Good question. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, I think my time might be up. There's one more question here. Great.
Hi, I have a question. So, the new administration coming, January 2025, they talk about like 60% tariff. Do you think that's possible? How if it happens, how's the 60% tariff impact the battery industry?
It's a very good question that I would like an answer to from someone in this room. And first I'll back up and ask, what is this new administration going to do? I don't think anybody really knows, but let's assume they're going to increase the tariffs. What I sense from my potential Chinese partners is an increased desire to manufacture locally because of the prospect of increased tariffs. Now, we might get in a trade war, and generally I think that's a bad idea. And I think, tariffs across the board are a bad idea for the economy. But targeted tariffs that can actually enable, this is what I'm hearing from the Chinese partners, tariffs might actually enable them to have a good enough manufacturing cost to get going in the United States because it's lower because of the tariffs. So that's just my own opinion. I think it's unpredictable what this new administration will do. I have heard Donald Trump say in speeches he wants Chinese manufacturing in the U.S. I've heard him say that. He now has a new best friend in Elon Musk. So Elon Musk might try to keep BYD out of the United States, but I guarantee you Elon Musk is going to want the rest of the supply chain in the United States. He's already working on it. Are there any other shots at answering that difficult
I just
question?
know from our perspective, we're modeling various, we have 301 tariffs on some of our input materials today that we actually buy from China to make our cam in North America. And, we're modeling what those tariff changes could be. Frankly, from the perspective of having to import cam with a tariff on it, that helps, me because I'm a domestic supplier. So, and again, if there are companies that are interested in investing in that domestic supply of that really important material, I think that fosters those discussions to propel faster. And so whether or not they change or not, it's definitely driving discussions to drive partnerships faster, which I think is important.
And there is, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just adding my thoughts on this. I think we should be careful not to get too far ahead of ourselves on this, and also to realize that, Biden was also promoting manufacturing in this country. I would say he was more of a carrot than a stick kind of guy. So positive incentives, negative incentives, it's still the same idea, which is to bring manufacturing home. But I also think we have to realize that the United States is not particularly competitive in a lot of manufacturing that involves a lot of labor because our labor costs are too high. So as you think about tariffs, you really have to think about it in the context of what is a manufacturing that our politicians want, and what is it that they don't want, and then think, plan for that. And I don't think it's going to change. It really isn't changing that much from Biden to Trump. It's just how they're approaching the incentives.
Thank you all. And one more comment on tariffs that it's a little bit off the question you were asking, but about a year ago, the CEO of Ford, the CEO of GM, the CEO of VW all said they're slowing down their electric vehicle plans because there was no market. Okay, that was their statement. It's out there in the public. All three of them said variations on that theme. And then GM and Ford lobbied the Biden administration to increase the tariffs that Trump had put in place. Those two statements do not go together. If you believe there is no market for electric vehicles, then why do you fear BYD and Li Auto and Zeekr selling cars in this country? Because you know there is a market. You just know that you don't have a product yet for that market. So I point that out just as an American consumer. Having been in those cars, we are a very consumer-driven society here in the U.S. I understand the fear of the legacy automakers because I've been in those cars in China. When Americans get their hands on those cars and get their butts in those seats in those cars, they're going to want to buy them. So it's a sideways point on tariffs. I do think tariffs could instigate investment and instigate manufacturing here in the U.S., but I do think they're also not long-lived. They won't live forever. Okay, well, thanks for all the time here today, and thank you all for your attention and questions, and thank you, panelists, for joining here. Much appreciated.